this video, we are going to discuss a bit about JavaScript task runners versus JavaScript bundlers. So after that, we are also going to discuss more about a bundling tool or JavaScript bundling tool called webpack. And finally, we are going to have a demonstration on how to use webpack for setting up development environment for ES6 6 or ES6 2015. So first of all, what exactly is the difference between a task runner versus a task bundler, or not a task bundler, JavaScript bundler? So in general, a task runner means basically it executes a series of JavaScript tasks. So the tasks are usually the development task at the client side. So what are all the various tasks? So in general, we can say like minifying of JavaScript files or minifying CSS files, and at the same time concatenating all the JavaScript files or CSS files into one, or transpiling SAS files into CSS, and so on. So all of those need to be accomplished by the developer at the client side using certain kind of tools. And in order to do or execute those tasks on a regular basis, we usually use a task runner. So all of the above tasks like minifying or concatenating or transpilation or compilation or build, whatever we are going to talk with respect to task, all of those tasks are usually performed through various plugins supported by the respective task runner. And we literally have plenty of plugins, like in thousands. So we can use any of those plugins as necessary for the respective task and respective development environment for the respective application. These two are the topmost task runners available in the market. Currently, those are Grunt and Gulp. So if you are not familiar with Grunt or Gulp, please refer to my previous videos on how to use any of those two. Next, what exactly is a JavaScript bundler? So we have already got some understanding about task runner. So let us think about bundler in general. So first of all, a bundler means it compiles JavaScript written using some kind of module system. So whenever you develop your JavaScript scripts using some kind of modular system like AMD, which is called as asynchronous modules definition, or CommonJS, or ES6 6 or ES6 2015, whatever you're going to call as, or even 2016 or 2017 for that matter, any of those particular scripts developed using those respective JavaScript patterns need to be compiled into plain JavaScript, because the browsers may or may not understand each of those particular features or patterns, whatever you are going to develop as part of your application. So in order to maintain the browsers independent development, or in order to achieve browsers independent development with respect to JavaScript, whatever you are going to develop, again, to leverage all the advanced features of the JavaScript alone using those particular modular systems, we need some kind of compilation to be happening. And those compilations can be easily achieved using the bundlers. And compilation is not just the only thing what the bundler will be doing. A bundle means essentially a compilation together with concatenation of all the files into one, and finally minifying those files as well. So whenever we say JavaScript bundle, which means all of your scripts will be bundled into one, which means you are going to add or say concatenate all of the files into one single file, and at the same time minify that for your production usage just in case. So JavaScript bundle means essentially you are going to compile your JavaScript files or your JavaScripts written using any kind of module system like AMD, CommonJS, or ECMAScript, or TypeScript, or any kind of technology or any kind of framework or any kind of pattern you might be using for developing scripts can be compiled, concatenated, and minified together, called as a bundle. And in order to achieve this, we have the bundlers. So the bundler essentially does all of these three in a very plain or a very simple way. And a bundler not necessarily be a task runner. So a bundler is not at all designed to be a task runner, even though they can do some kind of task with respect to task runner, like for example minifying JavaScript. So you can see you can also have the minification here, and you also have the minification here. Concatenation of files, you can also do that here, and you're also doing that here. Compilation you are doing here, you can also do it here. So however, as I mentioned, bundlers are not really designed to be task runners. And at the same time, task runners are not designed exclusively for the bundlers or bundling. So that is the main difference. There are certain tasks which can be accomplished only by the task runner, and there are certain tasks which can be accomplished only by the bundler. But still there are some kind of overlapping scenarios where we can just use the bundler for performing few tasks of the task runner also, and at the same time we can use only task runner to perform certain operations of bundler as well. So there is some kind of overlapping. However, if your particular concentration or development is mainly about bundling, then we would go with bundler. And if the development really needs complicated tasks or too many tasks to be performed one after another, then probably we might be switching to task runner, which also includes bundling in between. And any kind of bundler usually will have a module bundler designed as its core, which means the core development of the bundler is really focusing on the bundle, but not really on the task execution. But a task executor or a task runner doesn't know what is a bundle. It knows only about the task executions or whatever the task you provide to that to be performed. However, you are going to have the bundles also to be performed using the task runner using various plugins. Okay, next. Sometimes you can have the bundlers to be replacing task runners. As I mentioned, if your particular development of your application mainly uses only but the bundles and the bundling of your JavaScripts, then we might be just good with bundlers but not necessarily be using a task runner. But again, as I mentioned, it is only once in a couple of scenarios or few scenarios. If your particular development focuses on more number of tasks, including the bundler, then you might be working with task runner. And as mentioned, a bundler can never be a replacement of a task runner, and at the same time, task runner can never be a replacement of bundle altogether. Bundler is not limited just only for bundler. It can still integrate with the task runner. So if you are using some kind of bundler, and if you'd like to use that bundler to be used as a task inside a task runner, that is still possible. So which means you can have the bundlers to be integrated as part of your task runners. And these two are the popular bundlers currently available: Browserify and Webpack. So these four are the most important framework as of today. So Grunt and Gulp mainly used as task runners, and Browserify and Webpack mainly used as bundlers. And as I mentioned, if you'd like to use Webpack or Browserify with Grunt or Gulp, it is still possible. Next, what exactly is a Webpack? As I mentioned, first of all, Webpack is a module bundling system. It is essentially nothing but a bundler. Next, it is open source and platform independent, which means whatever the code you write, whatever the script you write as part of your Webpack, or whatever the configuration you do as part of your Webpack development is platform independent. So your script or your configuration essentially will be working in the same fashion either in Mac or in Windows or in Linux or whatever the platform you are going to use. And Webpack is open source. It works with Node and Node Package Manager behind the scenes. So you need to have Node or NPM to be installed on your machine before even working with the Webpack. So if you are not familiar with Node or NPM, please refer my previous videos. Next, Webpack, as I mentioned, mainly works with module bundling system. So whenever I say module bundling system, essentially it should support transpilation or say compilation of JavaScript modules. So whenever I mention JavaScript module compilation, essentially we are talking about various loaders. Webpack doesn't know how to compile all the various kinds of JavaScript modules available in the market or coming in future. So Webpack defines a framework on how to have the compilation of JavaScript modules to be happening. However, it will be using various loaders, and those loaders perform the transpilation using the webpack framework. So in order to have your particular transpilation to be accomplished, you might be using the respective loaders. For example, if you are using React.js, you might be working with Babel as your loader, and that Babel is essential in order to have the transpilation from ECMAScript or React.js to plain JavaScript. So all of those loaders are necessary to be installed as part of your application before even working with the webpack. So webpack is the core and loaders will be working on top of webpack. So that is pretty important. And as I mentioned, the whole goal of webpack is to make sure that whatever the JavaScript you might be writing is always safe to be used in any of the browsers. So which means regardless of any kind of JavaScript versions or the features supported by the browser, your JavaScript should be still working regardless. Next, it can be configured through webpack.config.js. So in general, whenever you are working with the webpack based development, you might need to have webpack.config.js. But again, this is not essential, but usually this is the way how the development starts. So it is not essential to have this file. However, the configuration can be done using webpack.config.js based on the necessity. And again, the next one, webpack can be easily customizable and extensible with loaders and plugins. So which means you have plenty of loaders and you have plenty of plugins in order to have your particular configuration or scripting of webpack to be customized or extended. It supports command line interface as well, so which means once you installed webpack as part of your application, you can go to the command prompt and use the webpack command to have certain operations to be accomplished, like compilation or execution of your config script or watching or whatever. And webpack is not just alone, it can be still integrated with task runners, grunt or gulp. And again, it is not needed, but it can be used. So if it is not needed to integrate it with grunt or gulp for your application, you better not use grunt or gulp. But if you think there are other steps or other tasks which need to be performed on top of what webpack can be performing, then you might need to integrate your webpack or your bundler with grunt and gulp. Last but not the least, you have built-in watcher. So which means if you are not familiar with watch, you might want to check my previous videos on grunt watch and gulp watch. So essentially a watch means it will be monitoring for all the modifications of your files as part of your operating system. So which means whenever you modify any of your JavaScript files or CSS files or Sass files, then the webpack can automatically understand that you modified those and it needs an immediate attention to that and compiles that on the spot. So that is pretty important. So that is mainly used for the development scenarios, and on top of that you can use the grunt watch or gulp watch based on the necessity. So watch is a file monitoring tool. So it essentially monitors for file modifications, and if any modifications happen, it just compiles on the spot and gives the latest version or latest compiled version of the JavaScript file immediately. And you can just go to the browser and refresh it without even worrying about the compilation anymore, as because Watcher takes care about the file modifications along with compilations. Okay, so the next one is demo. So I do not want to concentrate much on the ECMAScript development here, but it is going to be a good idea to have a kind of development environment to be set up using Webpack. So in this case, I took ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015 as my development environment to be used using Webpack. So in order to have Webpack to be used as a bundler for my ECMAScript 6 development or ECMAScript 2015 development, I am using Babel. So Babel is just another framework which mainly is used to have all the features of ECMAScript 6 and ECMAScript 2015 to be made available to the respective browser if the browser doesn't support those features. So I'm going to use Babel along with the webpack. So Babel is going to be the loader which will be working on top of the webpack. And just for our understanding, I'm going to use jQuery also to be used as part of my application. While this is not necessary, I just wanted to make sure that you can use any of your vendor or other related scripts like jQuery underscore or whatever the other kind of JavaScript frameworks you might have in place. Okay, so let me jump to my C. Let me create a new folder called my app. So this is going to be my application, so which means my JavaScript application is going to be maintained here. So I'm going to create everything from the scratch here. So as of now, I do not have anything here. The first thing is that I need to have the package.json to be maintained, and in order to have package.json, I need to have npm init to be executed as part of this folder. So I'm going to say open command prompt here, and I'm going to execute npm init. So essentially it asks for all the details for my particular package or my application. So the first thing, it is asking the name of my npm package. So in this case the default is my app. So I do not want to provide any special things here. I just keep on pressing enter so that it takes all the defaults. So just press enter here, and you can see it actually goes with all the default values, and it is asking me, is that okay? I press enter, and now you should be able to see package.json automatically created for my application. So let me open this inside my Sublime. So now you can see how the package.json has been created. So you have all the defaults, and now the next thing is that I'm going to have my index.html file to be created here. So let me create right in here. So I am going to create new file, and I'm going to call this one as index.html. So the first thing is that I would like to have one script file to be always included, and I'm going to call this script file as something like app.ir.js, and I would like to throw this file inside the build. And I'm going to have a simple button here, and I'm going to provide an ID for this button called something like show button, and in this case I just wanted to push show. Okay, so I can simply execute this by going to your my application and run your own favorite web server, whatever you might be having in place. So in my case I have ES6 here, so I just try to execute that and go to my browser, and I'm going to say localhost 8080, and now you can see I have the show button readily available. So let me go to my developer tools, and you can see build app.ir.js is not available. Why? Because of course I did not really create that, and that was my intention. So which means using webpack I would like to have all of my scripts available in various folders to be combined together into one bundle called app.ir.js, one file, and push that file directly inside the build folder. And in that way I'm going to have my particular application to be just downloading only one JavaScript file which contains all the scripts related information right inside that. So let us work through this one. Okay, so I go back to my Sublime here. The next thing is that I would like to have a new source folder to be created. So I go in here and I'm going to create something like source, and inside the source folder I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this one as message.js. So in this case this is an ECMAScript file, so which means all the object-oriented features of ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015 can be actually developed here. So in this case I do not want to really go in depth of ECMAScript, as because that is going to be out of the scope of this video. So I just wanted to have a very simple class to be maintained and developed. So I start with export default class So that is the name of the class is going to be message, and this class message is going to have a simple method called show, and inside the show I am going to have something like a hello world to be displayed in the form of an alert. So this is a simple JavaScript class, and it is currently using ECMAScript 2015 syntax. So I just save this one. So I'm done with message.js. So it is just nothing but a class. But in order to use this class, I need to create an instance of it, which means I need to create an object of this message class somewhere and then access this method, which is exactly what I'm going to do as part of my app.js, where I'm going to create a new file called app.js. So as part of this one, the first thing is that I would like to import my class called message, and currently I maintained the class name and the JavaScript file name as the same thing, so I can use the same file name right here. So I am saying that please import this file. So I can just say something like this, so which means it is going to go into the message.js, so which is nothing but this file, and that whole definition will be stored inside this variable called msg. So in this case, msg is nothing but message. So this whole definition is going to be made available in the form of msg. Msg is the class here indirectly. And similarly, let us consider I would like to have another one called jQuery. So currently you can see I do not have jQuery in my application. Why? Because if you go back to my index.html, I do not have jQuery. So I need to have jQuery to be installed as part of my application. So for that, I am going to use npm install, and I'm going to say save jQuery. So the moment I say that, it is going to pull out jQuery, which is available as part of the Node package manager. And once I install jQuery, I'm saying that please save that as part of my package.json. Okay, and now you should be able to see node underscore modules, and you have jQuery right in place. And if you open package.json, you're going to see jQuery, which is the latest version 3.1 currently installed on my machine, and only for this application. Okay, so once you have jQuery, then my app knows that it has to import jQuery straight from the node modules, and I'm going to say this jQuery to be made available in this variable called $. You can provide any variable here. For that matter, a is also a variable, but it is a traditional thing, like for every kind of jQuery thing we always use $. So let us go with $. Here. So the next thing is that I'm going to use the jQuery document load. So as part of this function, I am going to get the button, whatever I have in place. Like I have the show button, so I'm going to use that button here. So please get me that button, and on clicking of that button, I would like to say something like this. Create a new instance of the class message. So you can see I'm using the same variable whatever we have in place also here. So which means I have msg here, and the same variable I am using it here. So this variable contains the definition of message.js. So in that way, whenever I say new message, I'm essentially creating the instance of that class, and the instance is going to be made available as part of wo. And wo is going to have those methods, like I have show in this case. So the message class is having only one method show, and I'm going to use that as part of my app.js. So which means whenever I click on this show button, I would like to have a new instance of this class to be created, and immediately after that I am going to execute the method available in that class, which is nothing but show, and it has to just alert it. So in that way I have completed my app.js. So I managed to complete the most important stuff, like the my index.html, message, and app.js. Everything is fine. But there are a couple of other things which need to be accomplished. The first thing is that we need to have the respective babel or the loaders to be maintained. Webpack doesn't know what is ECMAScript in this case. Webpack simply doesn't know what is ECMAScript. It doesn't even know what is React.js. It doesn't know what is TypeScript. So we need to have the respective loaders in place. In this case, I would like to use Babel as the loader or the tool in order to have the compilation of my ECMAScript classes developed. The browsers will not be able to understand this code, and the browser cannot even understand this kind of code. So in order to have this code to be translated or transpiled into plain JavaScript, we will be using Webpack, and on top of that we'll be using the respective loaders which can understand these kind of syntaxes. Okay, so in order to accomplish this, we need to have several dependencies to be installed, and for that the first thing is that obviously we need to have Webpack to be installed. So I'm going to say install, and I'm going to say please install as part of dev dependencies. So save, and I'm going to say the first one to be installed as Webpack. Okay, so now that we have Webpack, so if you can see, you have the node modules, and inside the node modules you have the Webpack. And make a note that you have the .bin folder. So if you open that, you still have webpack.cmd, which is nothing but the command line tool which can be executed right from your prompt or command prompt. Okay, so now that we have Webpack, we still need to load the respective loaders. As I mentioned, Webpack alone cannot understand what is ECMAScript, what is TypeScript, what is React.js. We need to have the respective loaders to be installed or the presets to be installed. So in this case, I would like to have Babel to be installed as my loader, which can understand all the ECMAScript or React.js or anything, whatever you really want to have for your advanced JavaScript development. So the first thing I would like to have is npm install and Babel core. So you need to have Babel core, and on top of that you need to have the Babel loader, and on top of that you need to have Babel preset ECMAScript 2015. So all of these three packages are essential in order to have your ECMAScript 2015 based development to be maintained or to be developed as part of your application. So just press enter. Okay, so now that we have everything installed, let us go back to our package.json, and you should be able to see all of these in line. So we have Babel core installed, loader installed, and even the preset for ECMAScript 2015 also installed. And you can see we have the jQuery as something like the main dependency, which is always necessary as part of my application. That's what I mentioned. But however, these are only for the development. So once the development is done, we are not going to have this one as part of the production. So now that we have all the necessary libraries installed, the next thing is that we need to work with the Webpack configuration. So for that, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this one as webpack.config.js. As I mentioned in my presentation, we need to have this particular file to be created in order to have our Webpack related configuration to be done. So the first thing is that I need to have the path to be used for my application, and similarly, if you would like to have the Webpack related methods or other things to be accessed, you can also have your Webpack instance to be declared in this fashion. So in my part, I'm going to use the path variable in order to get the current module path and resolution of the current path and so on. But if you'd like to have Webpack related functionality, you can use this statement. Otherwise, you can just neglect it. So the next one is exports. So we need to have one particular object to be provided as part of Webpack configuration. So all the configuration will be made available through this main object, and this object needs to be exported in the form of a module. So the first thing is that what is the entry point of our application? As you can see, our index.html is our entry obviously, but we need to think from our application scripting side. So from the scripts perspective, we have two files, that is app.js and message.js. So message.js is being used inside app.js. If you can see, I am importing message.js right inside app.js. So in my case, app.js is my entry point for all the scripting which needs to be imported and executed. So I can say my application starts at app.js. So that statement, whenever I said my application or my scripts actually start with app.js, we can call that one as an entry point. And that particular entry point can be specified using a member called entry. And you can have as many entries as possible to be provided here in the form of collection. And in this case, I have only one object, that is go to the source folder and get app.js. So I'm saying that my entry point for my application is app.js, which is available in source folder right here. Okay, so the next one is output folder. So in my case, my output folder needs to be at certain location, because if you go back to my index.html, I'm expecting a file called app.all.js to be created. So I go back here and I'm going to say a file named, this one needs to be created. So that is the file name which is expected. However, that file needs to be made available at a different path called build. So I would like to have that one also to be specified here. So I can say something like path build. So I need to have a slash here. So in that way, I'm saying that once the bundling happens and once the bundling completes, the entire bundle or all the JavaScript needs to be concatenated together into one file called app.all.js, and that needs to be placed inside this path. So if you are not going to use this path, you can also use something like this. So you can use any of these two. So either this or this. So in this case, I just wanted to provide more options. So I just wanted to go with this approach. Okay, so I specified the entry point of my application. I specified the output. So which means once the bundle completes, where it has to be. Okay, so the output needs to be, in this case, I'm just using one object. So I just go with an object here. Okay, even the entry, I can just go with the one object here, but I'm just going to leave it as is. And now the next definition is a module. Every particular bundle, whatever you are going to make as part of your webpack configuration, is always defined in the form of a module. So whether you are compressing, or say whenever you minify the JavaScript file or CSS file, or whenever you would like to have the images or even fonts to be distributed or made available inline, everything is considered as a module. So in this case, again, I'm going to have a new module specification to be maintained, and I'm going to use loaders, as because I already installed my loaders, which is the babel loader in my case. So I'm going to have the babel loader to be used. So this is the loader which is mainly used for transpilation. And as I mentioned, babel contains several transpilation mechanisms. So which means it has got ECMAScript, TypeScript, React.js, and so on. But in my case, if you go back to package.json, I installed only one preset called ECMAScript 2015. So if you have React.js, you are going to have babel preset React, and so on. So in this case, I just wanted to go back to my webpack configuration, and I have to specify which preset it needs to use. So sorry, I'm already inside query. So which presets it needs to use? So I'm going to say it needs to have ECMAScript 2015 to be used. So which means babel loader to be used, and it has to use ECMAScript 2015. So if you go back to package.json, you can see babel loader is being used, and this loader behind the scenes uses core anyway, so you do not need to actually include that. So this will be obvious whenever you are using the babel loader. So on top of the babel loader, you have to specify which preset. In this case, it is ES2015, and if you go back here, you are going to see ES2015 here too. Okay, so the next thing is that what are all the files which needs to be transpiled. So in this case, I'm going to say, please go through all the JavaScript files, check all the JavaScript files, and try to transpile them. So you have the word called test, so which means test whether the file name is actually a JavaScript file in this case. So I'm going to say, please make sure that that particular file is always having the extension JavaScript, so that is .js. So test means it test whether the file name ends with .js or not. That is what it is meant. I don't know why they have provided this name, but we need to follow that regardless. Okay, so what I'm saying is that please go through all the JavaScript files and transpile them using babel loader with this preset called ECMAScript 2015. Okay, but when we say .js files, it includes every JavaScript file, including everything inside the node modules and so on. So I would like to be more specific, saying that please go through only this folder called source. So for that, I am going to say, please include only one path or one folder called source. So this is the easiest way to write it. So I'm using this path variable. You can see I'm using the same path variable here, and I'm going to say, please resolve source directory from the current directory. So this is automatically provided as part of the Webpack framework itself. So I'm saying that please resolve src folder which is available right from the current module folder. So it knows that how to figure out this source folder directly just by using this statement. So this is pretty much about our Webpack configuration. So you have the path. In this case, I'm not using Webpack. You can just forget it. And you have specified your entry, that is entry point of your application. So Webpack, whenever it is trying to transpile, it actually goes through app.js and figures out, okay, it has to download this guy, okay, it has to download this guy, and so on. So all of that information, it starts from app.js. So that is the reason we need to provide entry point. And output, obviously, once all the transpilation is being done, once all the compilation is being done, completed, then it has to concatenate everything and put into one JavaScript file called this one into this path. And how the transpilation should happen is usually configured as part of your loader. So in this case, I'm using babel loader with respect to ES2015 preset. So this is pretty much about Webpack configuration for our scenario, and this can go from very simple to quite complicated based on our particular application and our scenario. So you can literally have all the plugins also to be included, and even several loaders to be also maintained, along with several other tasks if you really wanted to integrate with task runner and so on. So this is something like a very basic step we are going for today. Okay, so looks like we are almost there. So we have app.js, message.js, and we have index.html, which is expecting app.al.js to be made available as part of build. So let me go back to my command prompt. Okay, and now you can see I have node modules. Okay, let me open this guy. So inside the node modules, I have the bin, and inside the bin I have Webpack. If you installed Webpack globally, you can say Webpack itself. So, but I do not have Webpack installed globally on my system, but I installed Webpack locally for my application. So that is the reason I have Webpack made available as part of package.json. So which means I have Webpack locally, and that is the reason I have node modules and Webpack in this case. So in order to execute Webpack, or in order to consider our webpack.config.js and execute our loaders and transpilation and everything, all you have to do is execute this guy, webpack.cmd, and it is available in node modules. So I'm going to say go to the node modules folder, and in that go to the bin folder, and in that execute webpack command. So you don't need to provide .cmd. It knows that it needs to automatically execute any file which has got the extension cmd. So just press enter here. Node underscore modules. Oh, I need to use the opposite one. So that is the backslash. So if you are using Mac or if you are using Linux, you will be using the front slash. So as this is Windows, I need to use the backslash. And okay, I have a typo somewhere, so which is test. So let me see what is that test here. Okay, actually this is supposed to be an object, so I need to have this one to be provided in the form of an object. Okay, so that is a mistake, so I saved it. So let me go back here, clear, and let me try executing it once again. Okay, so now you can see I have a build folder and it has automatically created app.all.js, app.all.js. So it has created it, and it took almost something like a minute to actually transpile this whole thing. So if you open the build here, you are going to see one file called app.all.js, and this whole file has been created by Webpack. So you are going to see our particular message class which has been transformed into this way. So which means you can see I have show and I have my alert. You can see it has converted my message.js, which used to be something like this simple, in order to make this particular class to be made available throughout all the browsers where the browsers can understand. It has actually transformed that class into this one. And not only that, even if you go to our app.js, for example, show button, right? So let me search for show button somewhere. And now you can see it has even transformed that code into something like this. So it is beyond our scope to actually go through why it has created and how it has created all this stuff, but it is just a quick heads up on how your particular application related scripts are being transpiled into a one JavaScript file which can be understood by almost all the browsers. So I do not want to go much into the depth here. I just wanted to close it for now. And as you have app.all.js, let me go back to my browser and let me refresh it. And now we should not be able to see that error anymore. And you are going to see inside the build I have app.all.js, so which is currently having 10,000 lines because it includes our jQuery stuff as well. So if you go back to our let me go back. So if you go back to my app.js, you can see I'm including jQuery as well. So if you remove jQuery from here, you are not going to see that huge. And all the code of your jQuery will also be included here, as because it is bundling all of the scripts into one file called app.all.js. So this guy includes message.js, app.js, jQuery.js, and whatever you have specified here. Everything will be included. And that is the reason it has got 10,000 lines there. Okay, but if you remove jQuery stuff, it is going to be quite lesser here. Okay, let us click on show, and now you can see I have hello world executed successfully. Okay, so that is pretty much about Webpack in general, and it will be better if I actually explain about watch also a bit. So let me go back to web.config here, and imagine I would like to have watching also to be included as part of my configuration. So which means if I modify message.js or app.js, it has to automatically compile. So in this case, let us consider I am not actually doing this guy. Then for every modification, so which means if I go back to message.js and if I say something like 1 in this case, I had to go back to my command prompt and execute this webpack, wait for 1 minute or 2 in order to have that whole thing to be compiled. And once that is done, then I have to go back to my browser, click on refresh, and then click on show in order to get that one. But imagine I do not want to have that step, so which means I do not want to execute this command every time I modify my particular JavaScript files. That is where the watch can be helpful. So I go back to my configuration here, and I'm going to say please have watch to true. So once I have this, I can go back to my command prompt, execute this command, and now you can see it has compiled or transpiled into app.il.js, and still it is waiting here for any of the modifications to be taken into the consideration. So let me resize this a bit so that you can see how it is actually trying to do the watch. So I open message.js here, and imagine I'm modifying 1 to 2, and the moment I say file, save, you can see it can automatically detect that a file has been modified, and it immediately transpiled that in almost like 80 milliseconds. All you have to do is go back to your browser, refresh it, and click on show, and it has to show 2 now. So let us do it once again. Let me open this. So I'm modifying this one to 3. That's a typo here. And I go to file, save, and now you can see it has completed it. And now I go to browser, refresh this, click on show, you are going to see 3. So in that way you can have the watch to be also made available in the form of configuration. So let me press Ctrl C here to cancel this job. And there is another easier way. So if you are not quite happy with this watch configuration right here, you can remove that. However, you can still accomplish the same using the command webpack with watch right here. So this is nothing but you are saying that please execute this whole config file with watch consideration. So just press enter here, and it is going to transpile anyway for the first time, and it will be waiting there. Now I am going to modify, so let me resize this again. So I go back to message.js, and in this case instead of 3, if I am going to say 4, and I say file, save, you can see it has automatically detected the modifications, and it has created a new build out of it. And now let me go back to my browser and click refresh, and you are going to show, and you have got 4. Okay, so this is pretty much about how you can have webpack to be used as part of your JavaScript bundler. As a JavaScript bundler for bundling or transpiling all of your ECMAScript files and TypeScript files or React.js files into plain JavaScript files using the watch or without watch, just by using client-side commands. So if you really wanted to include webpack to be made available as part of Task Runner, you can still do it so, and that is going to be covered in my upcoming sessions.